What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. With week 3 having wrapped up, you know what time it is. I'm coming at you with my week 4 waiver wire pickups. So let's get right into it. As always, we start at the quarterback position and we unveil things with Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. The sensational rookie debut versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was a hit. 336 yards, 4 total touchdowns, but most importantly, a comeback from behind victory. And week 4's matchup is going to be a good one. If you're looking for a waiver wire pickup for a streamable quarterback, Daniel Jones has a very friendly matchup here. The Redskins made Mitch Trubisky look like a viable quarterback. Don't think twice. Scoop up Daniel Jones. He is a good week 4 start. Whether that continues for the rest of the season, we will see. But at least for one more week, Daniel Jones will be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Next up, we've got Jacoby Brissett of the Colts, who somewhat unexpectedly led the Colts to yet another victory, this time versus the Falcons last week. And in that win, he had 310 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. Very efficient, effective game from Brissett. And even though he saw T.Y. Hilton exit that game, this week 4 matchup versus the Oakland Raiders and that banged up secondary is way too juicy to pass up. And with bye weeks now starting to go into effect, Jacoby Brissett, not a bad option. The third and final quarterback on our list is Case Keenum. And again, I know this is not going to be a popular addition here, considering what he did versus the Chicago Bears. I'm not even going to mention the stats. That's how bad of a day he had. But again, this all comes down to matchups here, folks. And last week, we mentioned the name Jameis Winston, who hadn't really done anything. And then he had a pretty respectable showing versus the New York Giants. I think that Case Keenum can go ahead and do that same type of thing versus this Giants defense in week 4. I don't expect the Redskins to go ahead and necessarily get the victory, but for fantasy purposes, I do expect Case Keenum to have a more than serviceable performance. Getting to our running backs, we start with Wayne Gallman of the New York Giants, who will undoubtedly be the highest pickup priority on everyone's free agency wire, not only at the running back position, but in general, primarily because obviously the Saquon Barkley high ankle sprain that is expected to keep him out between 4 to 8 weeks. It'll probably be somewhere in between. But the point being here is that Gallman right now is the starting quarterback of the New York Giants. Obviously, he's not on the same level as Saquon Barkley. So if you're expecting similar type of production, then, you should lower those expectations. You'll probably at best see middle level RB2 type of production for these next couple of weeks. But it's all about volume in fantasy football. And as of right now, Gallman will be the main running back for the Giants unless they add another veteran running back presence in there. And that should mean more opportunities for Gallman, which will make him, for at least several weeks, a viable option. Next up, we've got Darrel Williams of the Kansas City Chiefs, and Williams finds his way into this list due to more and more injuries at the running back position for the Chiefs. Last week, it was Damian Williams. He missed week 3. LaShawn McCoy, questionable. Then he gets banged up in game. And all of a sudden, it was Darrel Williams that found himself at the head of that running back committee, not Darwin Thompson. And he put together a respectable performance considering it was pretty late in that game to begin with. 5 receptions for 47 yards and then 62 rushing yards on the ground. The point being is, doesn't matter who the Chiefs face. Offensively, they are a juggernaut. They are matchup proof. And whoever is the starting running back for that team carries a lot of value due to that. And if there's even an outside chance that Darrel Williams could be that guy heading into week 4, he presents high-end running back 2 value. So go ahead, keep an eye out on this running back situation for the Chiefs. And if it looks like that McCoy and Damian Williams are trending in a negative direction, then Darrel Williams becomes a very important pickup. The third and final running back on our list is Jamaal Williams of the Packers. And look, this edition probably won't be one that you go ahead and start in week 4, but the more and more the Packers play, the more and more we get a sense of this offense and what LaFleur wants to do with the Packers, the more we're seeing a 50-50 split between Aaron Jones and Jamaal Williams. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that we can all see that Aaron Jones should be that guy, but Matt LaFleur wants to go ahead and keep Jamaal Williams involved. In fact, if it wasn't for the 2 touchdowns that Aaron Jones had this last week in week 3, Jamaal Williams would have done better in terms of scoring performance than Aaron Jones. So I would say long-term, Jamaal Williams, not a bad handcuff to Aaron Jones. Probably don't want to play him against this Philadelphia rushing defense, but considering that this timeshare is something that's very real and that Aaron Jones is someone that has struggled to stay healthy for the majority of a season, Jamaal Williams, long-term, not a bad idea. Next up, we get to our wide receivers, and we start with DJ Chark of the Jaguars, and there's a chance he might not be available on waivers, but if he is, go ahead and invest a pickup in him because it's been 3 straight weeks with a touchdown for this Jaguars wide receivers. This last week, 4 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Now he gets this Denver defensive matchup where the Denver defense hasn't been as good as we'd like to see, particularly in the secondary. We saw Marquez Valdes-Scantling have a pretty good day against them this last week, and possibly, look, the matchups weren't as favorable on paper for the Jaguars. The injury to Nick Foles increases the chances that Chark might be available. So again, if he is, go ahead, inquire about putting in a bid for him, putting in a waiver wire pickup for him, because he seems to be one of the most targeted guys on that offense and a guy that Minshew will be looking for. Our second and final wide receiver on this list is Phillip Dorsett of the Patriots, who this last week went for 6 receptions, 53 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, Dorsett has a couple things going for him. Look, first and foremost, Antonio Brown no longer with the Patriots. That drama is over. And then second thing is Julian Edelman got a little bit nicked up in week 3 versus the Jets. So if he isn't able to go, the value of Dorsett goes up even more. Now, albeit he is someone that won't be consistent on a week-to-week basis, but we have seen him be able to get behind defenses, deliver on some long touchdowns, and even though the matchup might not be friendly on paper, the Patriots, again, one of these offenses that are, for the most part, matchup proof. So Dorsett worth a waiver wire pickup, especially if the status of Edelman trends in the wrong direction. Transitioning to our tight ends, we start with Will Dissly of the Seahawks, who this last week had 6 receptions for 62 yards and a touchdown. And now you could argue that a lot of that was garbage time production, but what you can't deny is this matchup in week 4 versus the Arizona Cardinals is absolutely the most favorable you could want as far as tight end production. The Cardinals have been absolutely shredded by Greg Olsen, by Mark Andrews, and I bet that list is going to grow with the addition of Will Dissly as well. So I'd go ahead and, if he's still available, if he wasn't picked up last week, definitely put in a waiver wire request for Dissly in week 4. Next up, we have Vernon Davis of the Redskins, and probably not too popular to have multiple Redskins on these types of lists, but what you can't deny is the matchup is incredible, and that's the big takeaway here. This Giants defense will be one that is targeted when you're looking for streamable offensive players. We already mentioned Case Keenum. We're going to mention Vernon Davis as well. He's probably the next biggest target that you could acquire that is more than likely available off of waivers. And with the recent news that Jordan Reed, these concussion issues more serious than were believed, is he even going to play this season or ever again? Vernon Davis becomes a guy in favorable matchups that you want to target. The third and final tight end on our list is Jack Doyle. And he was a guy that only had 4 receptions for 46 yards this last week versus the Falcons. But again, 2 favorable things that are going to have him be a sleeper tight end addition. First, the Oakland matchup. And second of all, the potential absence of T.Y. Hilton. Was it just something that we saw that was precautionary for him to be held out? Was it something that might be a week or longer in terms of absences? Either way, Jack Doyle between him and Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle is more of that natural pass catcher that I think is more than likely to benefit out of all the tight ends due to a departure or an absence of T.Y. Hilton. And finally, we get to our defenses, and we kick things off with the Baltimore Ravens, who, look, they're going to be a good defense for the majority of this season. But since we know that a lot of people do stream defenses on a week-to-week basis based on matchups, it's very possible that the Ravens defense was dropped because of that matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs this last week. And if that's the case, go ahead and pick them up because they've got a great matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, who have struggled tremendously on offense. Baker Mayfield hasn't looked like what we expected. That offensive line continues to struggle, and that means the Ravens defense should have a potential at home in this divisional contest to have a pretty productive performance. Next up, we've got the LA Chargers, who get the Miami Dolphins this week. And honestly, I feel like I shouldn't have to say that much more about this matchup. But unfortunately, every single time we have a defense that can take advantage of the Miami offense, the Miami team in general that's going to struggle this entire season, then we have to highlight them. And the Chargers are definitely a defense that can do that. They've got those playmakers up front that should force several turnovers, get you some sacks. And honestly, the Chargers should be a slam dunk pick for at least 10 defensive points in week 4. The third and final defense on our list is that of the Indianapolis Colts, who have a home game versus the Oakland Raiders. And right now, the Raiders, even though they've done some nice things, we have continued to see that Carr is turnover prone. And maybe with Darius Leonard returning for that defense, we're going to see an added bonus defensively for the Colts. I think that they'll have at least 1 or 2 turnovers off of Derek Carr. We saw them be successful versus Matt Ryan, and that's a much more balanced offense than what the Raiders have. So even though the Raiders might put up a lot of yards on the Colts, I think defensively speaking, the Colts defense will have a decent day at the office. So with that, we wrap up our look into the waiver wire pickups for week 4. And as always, let me hear it in the comments section. Did you agree, disagree with the names on this list? Were there guys that you would add to this bunch? And along with any other questions you guys might have, let me hear it in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in future videos.